It's been over 3 years since I've had the Khaki Fields in my collection. I'm still a fan, but the rose-colored glasses I once viewed them through are gone, and I now appreciate them with a clarity and understanding that isn't blinded by Swiss fantasy. Let's discuss and overthink about it together, shall we? In regards to my watch collection, Hamilton has had a significant impact on shaping how I view things like quality and value. As I'm sure this applies to many others, this brand was my first foray into the world of Swiss horology. They're expensive enough to feel like you're buying something special, but not so egregiously unattainable that the average employed man can't get one. Sounds like an ideal luxury buying experience. Who wouldn't want that? And what is the assumption with Swiss watches? They're perfect, right? At least that's the expectation. With how much mainstream media coverage that shines on them, it's almost impossible to not buy into the Hamilton branding and the semi-accessible world of Swiss luxury. I think if you're a smart, sensible man and you bought into the hype and you got one Hamilton watch and rocked it for the rest of your life, like how any non-watch addicted psycho would, then there's nothing wrong with that. In that context, Hamilton is awesome. Objectively, they make a great functioning watch and a damn good looking one at that. But you're not here because you're a smart, sensible man. You're here because you're a degenerate watch addict. You're obsessed with comparisons and you're only satisfied when you're unhappy. So in that context, Hamilton is kind of a shit brand. Understanding that I can only speak from my experience, after learning about how unspecial Ebosch movements are and how much further my money can go outside of Switzerland, I found that the mentality of blindly assuming the country of origin determines the quality of a watch is completely fucked. Once I experienced a broader spectrum of watches and saw past the veil of marketing, I realized that this caliber of Swiss watchmaking is kept afloat by a lot of storytelling and hype. That's not always a bad thing. I think if watches are a form of expression, then there's nothing wrong with some wrist cosplay. But if the tall tales force you into thinking you simply have to go the Swiss route because that automatically makes it top quality, to the point where you feel compelled to spend outside of your comfort zone, then it is a very bad thing. Because that's where you may come to the rude awakening that the Swiss don't make watches any more solid than any other solid watch you've already experienced. They usually cost double to triple the amount of other similar watches, and you're simply not getting double or triple the experience. And I get it, there's no set rules on what value is, and there are so many variables like personal affordability and priorities that affect it. So understand that this is just part of my complicated relationship with the Hamilton brand over the last few years. Even with my distaste for the overhyped, over-advertised state of the Swiss watch industry, a good watch is still a good watch, and these ones are simply victims of their own success. When it comes to watches, you can very much be the hero long enough until you become the villain. Look at Rolex. Look at Omega. Look at every major brand that started from humble beginnings and exploded into giants. I don't think saying it's because these brands forgot their roots is always the right answer. I think it's just expectations and demands mutate into this insatiable monster that's impossible to overcome. Then add in paid YouTubers constantly embellishing and over-exaggerating claims that these $1,000 watches are so good, so entry-level, and so affordable. There is an unavoidable delta between what we're being told versus what we actually get, and that does ruin the experience. These things are not affordable, and the only place they're cheap is on the secondhand market where their true value is revealed. Realizing you fell for the Swiss snake oil pitch is embarrassing, so the best way of damage control is to just continue pushing the lie. After all that overthinking, after all that bullshit, I still own and very much enjoy my Khaki Fields. It's important to understand what these watches are and what they are not. These are relatively simple watches that do what they're designed to do when cared for properly, no different than any other tool. Sure, they don't live up to the grand expectations of Swiss horology, but they live up to my expectations, which consists of telling the time good enough, being able to get wet sometimes, being comfortable to wear, and looking clean as fuck. What they are not is spec monsters or heritage investments by any stretch of the imagination. There's no ingenuity or expert Swiss craftsmanship here. Just like with most Swiss watches, it's all mass-produced stuff, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was just as Chinese as an AliExpress special. Don't quote me on that. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if it was. But just like how all of my Chinese watches are good, so are these. They do what they're supposed to do. I do still think there's something special about the Khaki Fields. They have a certain sleekness to it that isn't quite captured elsewhere. Maybe it's just from the power of branding, who knows. I have to admit that the Hamilton logo on the dial is very classy to me, and if all it takes is a superficial logo to make me enjoy a watch, then so be it. For real though, these are sharp looking. Between the logo, the slim case profile, and the professionally straightforward ETA movement, these are watches that are arguably unremarkable, but in that plain-faced simplicity, I find a perfect fit for the daily routine. It's this kind of style that's familiar, dependable, and quietly sits in the background instead of demanding attention. You may have noticed that there's no mirror polish on the bezel, and that's because I removed it. I'm not a fan of mirror polish, and the brush surface is a night and day change for me. It's not pretty, I know, but I prefer the not pretty worn look on a watch. I get a lot of comments on how the lack of AR coding renders them useless, which I understand the frustration, but I don't take seriously. I've never had any issues with legibility, and if there was an instance where there were too many reflections on the crystal, I wouldn't have noticed because it takes half a microsecond to angle the watch slightly in a different direction to see through it. You may also hear a lot about how the lack of a screw-down crown is bad, which I also understand the frustration and also don't take seriously. There is an emotional attachment to screw-down crowns because on a superficial level, they look more robust, but they don't offer any more waterproofness and instead only introduce more ways that the owner could fuck it up. If, for a second, we step away from the fantasy land of improbable scenarios and consider what this watch is actually going to go through during the course of our lives, a push-pull crown offers far more pros than it does cons. Of course, we all have different priorities. I'm simply offering a different perspective from the church of the screw-down crown. The lume application is where I think we can all agree Hamilton has room to grow. Granted, I haven't purchased a new release in a while, so I don't know if they've improved in this category since then. Personally, I don't feel too strongly about it one way or the other. I wake up at 3 a.m. every day and it still has a glow by that time. But the fact of the matter is, there are watches a third of the cost that have better lume performance by a substantial margin. That's just how it is. I wouldn't blame you if you're confused by now. I'm all over the place and that's just the way she goes, boys. Watch collecting for degenerates is chaotic lawlessness. There are no rules, but sometimes there are rules. And sometimes those rules are based on facts. But then again, sometimes those facts are subjective, and the chaos goes on forever. The Khaki Field exists in that middle ground where logic and emotion constantly fight each other. On paper, it's outgunned. On value alone, it's questionable. In the cold, spreadsheet-driven world of spec comparisons, it loses more battles than it wins. And yet, none of that kills it for me. Because watches aren't purchased from spreadsheets. They're purchased in moments of weakness, nostalgia, aspiration, and self-justification. They're bought because something about them clicks, even when your rational brain is screaming that a microbrand, a Japanese tool watch, or some unpronounceable Chinese reference would do the same job for half the price. After 3 years, the honeymoon is over, but the enjoyment is still there. The bullshit has been stripped away, the marketing spell has worn off, and what's left is a watch that I understand now. Not as a symbol of Swiss superiority, but as a simple object that fits into my day without friction. If you're new to watches and you want to believe in the fantasy, the Khaki Field will happily play along. If you're deep in the rabbit hole and cynical as hell, it still has enough charm to earn a place in the rotation. Just don't confuse it for something it isn't. It's not a benchmark, it's not a flex, it's not a revelation. It's just a pretty good watch. That is all. Stay classy. I sure as hell won't.